Hey internets, how are you doing today? I hope you're having a wonderful and awesome day today. Welcome back for another episode, or today we're going to do another walk. We're going to animate it from start to finish. And today we are going to be talking about and focusing on exaggeration. That's right, exaggeration. I'm going to really exaggerate stuff today. So let's take a look at what Frank and Ollie, two of the awesome founders of animation, Nine Old Men, had to say about that. Exaggeration is not extreme distortion of a drawing or extremely broad, violent action all the time. It's a caricature of facial features, expressions, poses, attitudes, and actions. Action traced from live action film can be accurate, but it'll look stiff and mechanical. In feature animation, a character must move broadly to look natural. The same is true of facial expressions, but the action should not be as broad as in a short cartoon style. Exaggeration in a walk, or an eye movement, or even a head turn will give your film more appeal. Use good taste and common sense to keep from becoming too theatrical and excessively animated. Alright, so let's get into the scene today and let's keep that stuff in mind. Like usual, we are using Maya 2010, and this is the Goon Rig from the wonderful folks over at the How to Cheat in Maya series, and all that stuff will be linked in the information below down here. And we got that pulled up, so let's work on the most important thing, and that is that initial start pose. So I was looking through some figure drawing reference the other day while I was working in the morning. I always draw first thing in the morning. I find that's really good to get the creative juices flowing. And there was this pose that was kind of like a yoga pose that I really hadn't seen done before. And I thought that would be fun to try to get in there and see if we could kind of recreate that and turn it into a walk. So let's see if we can do that. So in this pose, the girl was bent down and kind of scrunching down, but her arms were straight up in the air in kind of a reaching motion. And I tried doing it myself. I always recommend that everybody, when you're learning animation, always try and recreate whatever it is that you're going to animate, because you're going to come up with different ideas and see different things than you would have if you just went straight into Maya and didn't do it yourself. I would show you how I recreated it, but the camera angles, I'd have to rearrange a whole bunch of stuff to do it. But perhaps in the future I'll add that into it. So we're going to get this loosened up a little bit more here. And we'll establish. Now, a couple things we want to keep in mind with doing this is that we want to keep the weight here, and we want it not to look too static. We want it to be an exciting and dynamic pose to start off with. And we're going to rotate those hands in and stretch them out. And same with this side. I think we'll do... And I haven't quite decided on which camera angle we're going to focus on. I think probably more something like that will work well for kind of setting out the layout for this shot. Because if we do it too flat, I don't think we'll see enough of the animation, and if it's too front to back, it won't really accentuate it very much. So probably like a 3/4 view is going to be best for that. So it's good to kind of have that in mind so that you can really animate to camera as well. And again, when I say animate to camera, I mean make sure that the animation looks best at the camera angle or the angle that you're viewing it at. But also it's good to flip that around and stuff just to make sure everything's working from there. Now, exaggeration is really fun, but it's also one of those tricky things, which if you watched yesterday's video, I think we dealt with that almost as much as we were dealing with arcs, in that I think we probably over-exaggerated some stuff along the way, but then we went back and we pulled it back. So use exaggeration as a tool to help sell your animation, but you don't need to force it into places where it isn't necessarily needed. So definitely keep that in mind. If the arms are up, the shoulders are going to be up there too, so we're going to pull those up a little bit. And those arms feel a little rigid, but let's just get started on the walk here. And since it is a walk, we're going to pull one of those feet back and a little bit forward. Make sure we still got a good balance in between there. And let's go ahead and save off what we have right now. File save as walk. And just making sure the recording is still going. And let's select everything and set a key. And one thing that I keep forgetting to show you guys to do at the beginning is turn off everything. Show your NURB curves, NURB surfaces, and polygons. That way we have a real lightweight scene. We don't have to worry about accidentally keying anything else. And let's get started. We're going to need to go in and get some more interesting hand poses as we go along, but let's start laying down the foundation and figure out how this thing is going to work here. Okay, we're going to have one step here. Might be a little. But I think in doing that, we might need to make these steps a little bit bigger, because I still want them to be steps. Okay. And we'll go here and we'll lift that foot up and drag it back and then have it land. And then we got this one. Set a key there, then go to 24. Move it forward. Then we got to move the hips forward. There. And this walk too shouldn't take as long as our one yesterday, but if it does, it does. Animation, you can never fully. If you want good animation, I would say, you know, let it take as much time as it takes to get to where it needs to go. So if one walk takes you 3 hours and another one takes you a half an hour to get something good, that's kind of the nature of art. Sometimes the muses, as it were, visit quickly, and sometimes they take a little while to get to where they need to go. Okay, so we're just laying down the foundation here for this walk, and let's go ahead and lift it up for that passing position and drag it down. Zero those values out, hit it there, and raise it up, and drag it down, and there we go. Okay, so let's see. Now let's go in Graph Editor and clean that. Actually, let's make sure we add those up and downs on the hips on the passing position before we get there. Up, down, we didn't do an up here. And it's important to do some ups and downs on this one for sure, because with this kind of a position, you would really have to lift up your butt to be able to pick those feet up. You couldn't have a minimal up and down on that one. Oh, and one other thing that I want to make sure and do that I noticed when I was trying to recreate this pose is that keeping your feet flat like that is near impossible. You're going to have to set a lot of your weight on the toes, at least when you're walking. If you're just idling, you probably could do it without that. So let's get back into those feet. And we added a little bit of ball roll, and I'll show you how we'll work with that in a little bit, but we want to make sure we put that into our initial stuff so we don't forget that later. Okay, so let's see how this looks right now. Okay, really got a lot of the foundation stuff that we need that we're going to work with, so let's go ahead and clean that up. We're just going to clean up the translate Z, and that's basically the left to right movement in the animation. And then we're going to, this is the up and down. The passing position is we're going to be like the frame where or set of frames where one foot passes in front of the other or behind the other to get to be the forward step. So it's if this is the walk, if this is the back foot and this is the forward foot, it will be when this one passes that one and goes to the next. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about the passing position. accentuate that up, or exaggerate that up and down, since that's the principle that we're focusing on today. Let's see. Okay, now let's add a little bit of sway on the hips, because if this foot's going to be up in the air, the hips are going to favor the planted foot. So let's add a little bit over there, a little bit over here, a little bit over here. And again, I'm sure a lot of you who are doing walks are familiar with a lot of these concepts, but there might be people out there who are just starting out. So we try to mention a little bit of everything here, so there might be some good tips for people who are intermediates and beginners. And maybe some more advanced users can just recall some things that they might not be thinking about currently, but they already know, which I'm sure almost all of you are. And if not, you'll definitely get there someday. Keep practicing. Okay, right now we're just offsetting the chest since we did some movement in the hips there. And let's make sure we got those rotates in there. Okay, now we're going to pull the graph editor up and we're going to balance those out so we're not really favoring one side or the other on here. It's a little more even. It doesn't have to be exact because there's always different factors in a walk, so it wouldn't be exactly precise or it'll look too robotic, but something pretty even, so that it doesn't look like one side's being favored over the other, unless that's an intentional purpose, like if they have a limp or if one side's weaker than the other. You get the idea. Okay, and we're going to zero out that there. Okay, so let's see how that's looking right now. Alright, that's starting to get to a place that I want it to be, and again we're going to be probably looking at it from this kind of an angle, so let's make sure everything's working that way. Looks like it is. Now let's get back into the hip controller and let's start favoring the forward steps with that. So that's going to be the rotate Y, and that's going to favor that one since it's forward. Now we'll favor the other one, and back, and forth, and back again. And then we'll get into the chest, and we'll do the opposite of what we have in the hips there. So when it's favoring that side, this side will be the forward leaning side in the chest, and vice versa. And this is probably a little over exaggerated today. Again, keeping in mind the exaggeration principle. So let's go ahead and tone that down and even it out a little more. Because again, on something like this, we don't want that to be the focus of a side-to-side kind of a walk. We just want to be able to feel that through the walk, so it's more believable. So we're keeping up with that illusion of life. Now, exaggeration, if we were doing a close-up shot, is really fun to do in facial expressions. Now, you don't want to do something like that. That's way too over the top and theatrical. But it is fun to, if you're doing a shock, instead of doing this, bring it up and really over exaggerate it. It's very fun to do stuff like that. But we're just doing more body mechanics rather than acting and facial movements here. But it's definitely things to keep in mind, especially when you're thinking about the principle of exaggeration. Now let's do, it's a little early, but let's get into the butt controller since that's going to be kind of a focus here. So we're going to rotate it that way, and rotate it that way, rotate it back, and back again, and then zero it out. And let's see how that works. Okay, and then let's go ahead and favor the forward, and the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and that one. Okay. Now that looks a little bit too much for me right now, but the feeling is there. So we'll go in and we'll just take all of those values and keys that we have and we'll just shorten them up and kind of even them out as well. And again, one of those principles to remember when you're animating is don't be afraid to go big and nearly break the rig. And by breaking the rig, that means doing an animation so much that it causes like the joints to disconnect, or the fingers to look completely mangled, and you can always pull it back from that, rather than inching forward and taking forever with something. Go ahead and really oversell it and then pull it back. Over exaggerate it and then pull it back. That's totally fine. And that still feels a little too busy for me. So stop that for a second, and we're going to just crank those down even more. And then go back to the principle of timing, and we'll use a timing element on the hips, or this butt controller. But before that, I think I want to do a little bit of compress and release in the chest, so that excuse me, it'll hopefully look like it's stretching out a little bit more on the passing positions than the contact positions. And not too much. We don't want to really over exaggerate that, but a little bit. And let's go ahead and even these values out. These are the rotate X. That's going to be like the wobble forward and back of the hips. And I'm sure some of you think that I might be over animated in my screen over here, but that's just, it's way more fun to animate if you can get into it. If you look at a lot of the old animators, there's a cool thread on Reddit either yesterday or the day before that had a collection of a bunch of the old animators, and how, like I talked about the other day, holding up a mirror, making facial expressions in the mirror, trying to get the nuances that they might not have thought of when they're just doing it. They have to look at some sort of a reference, and don't be afraid to use reference as a starting point, I would say, or to add extra flourishes that you might not have thought. I really am kind of against mimicking reference, but when you're just starting out, it's totally fine to start. If you don't understand timing yet, go break down a shot and figure out on what frame things hit. Or if you're not sure about exaggeration, since that's the thing we're talking about today, look at how a human being can look elongated and really stretched out, or squashed and hunched over and really crushed down. And that's look at the extremes of facial expressions, of how grumpy a face can get or how happy it can get, and see all the different exaggeration that you can throw into the cheek muscles, the lips, pursing the lips together, pouting them out, opening the eyes more, lots of different things. Okay, I'm getting distracted here from what we're working on. We're doing some compress and squash and stretch into the chest here. So let's even out that. I think this might be a little too much, but let's play it a couple times and see what we think. Okay, so let's see. And let's look at it from the angle that we're going to be looking at it. That looks fine. I'm okay with that. Maybe a little too much side to side, which would be like rotate Z on the hips and chest. So we'll go ahead and turn that down a little bit. I still like the overall feel to it. I feel like it's working okay. I have the hiccups today, so sorry about that. Gotta get, love to get a stinger board so we could do, how do we say, butt animation is our one that we were going to use before if you've been watching the other videos. Okay, so we got some, it's playing overall pretty nice. I think I'm definitely going to want to play up the shoulders since we got the arms up. So when it's stretching up there, let's have it really exaggerate that stretch up on the shoulder. And when it's coming down, we'll go ahead and settle it down. We don't have to do too much since it's still going to be lifting up. But that way we sell this as an exaggerated and really reaching motion there. And always remember in movements that most everything, like they tell you in karate or something, a lot of your force and your movement comes from the hips. So, if you're punching someone, don't just stand there and punch. Not that I'm advocating violence, I'm just explaining how how moves work, that, you know, if you swing from the hips and really put all that force into it, that's where the force is coming. So in this case, when I'm talking about the shoulder, you know, it comes from the hips leaning, the chest stretching, and then the shoulder going out, and the upper arm, and all the way up to stretching up like that. Okay, let's get into the other side here, and pull that down a little bit. And we might mess with the timing on this too. Have it either, I think it would probably lead movement, but perhaps it would follow a frame since the chest would be leading that. And I think I do, even though the pose I was looking at was pretty straight, I think I want to do a little bit of bend in those arms because I don't think they would be that straight. And perhaps that, and something like that with a little more rotate open. Okay, so let's see how that looks. Now before we get any further, let's go ahead and get into these hands and start with, give us a better starting pose, because right now we got the real mitt, you know, looks like a giant baseball glove or something pose. So let's give something a little more exciting into those fingers. I do kind of don't mind the grouping too much, but maybe a grouping kind of like this, where we have this finger offset from that being a group. So let's do the middle spread that way, and the ring spread that way. Not that much. And there's some really great hand reference, I think on Andreas Deja's blog, Deja Vu. Feel free to Google that. He used to have some really cool old Disney animator, I believe they were milk call hands poses, and he just, you know, snapped different pictures of different hand poses, and I remember studying those for quite a while, and I still reference them all the time. Okay, all the time isn't super accurate, but I printed out a copy and I have it somewhere in my thing that I do look at fairly often when I feel like I'm just reusing the same 5, 6 hand poses all the time. It's really nice to get in there, you know. Other than that, feel free to start noticing when your friends are talking how they move their hands, or if they have a natural way that they just rest their hands or whatever. It's always good to kind of make a mental note to yourself that you can come back in and throw that into your animation to give it a little more character and a little more uniqueness than it might have otherwise. Okay, so just in case you forgot what we're doing, we're going in here and we're making the hands a little more interesting. And so we pushed this index into the middle a little more. So we got a grouping there and a grouping there. And let's see if we can get a better thumb. It's okay. At least that's a little more interesting than the mitt that we had before. So now let's go ahead and watch that. Now here, I think we want to trying to figure out what we can do with the arms. I want to keep them very similar and just reaching up, but I think we want to just kind of give a little bit of give in the arm and the elbow as well. So should we do it where we offset it and keep it on the timing like the legs, like a normal walk should do? Should we do it in the middle? We'll play around with it for a little bit. Let's go ahead and save our work real quick. Just Control S, save often, don't want to lose your stuff. And let's do a little rotate there. Yeah, let's favor the upper hand. Do something like that. So if you get what I'm saying, if this one's the upward reaching one, this one will almost be line of actioning into that one. And again, if you're not watching this on YouTube or you're just listening to it, that's probably not going to be a very good description, but so let's see how that looks. Okay, I think that works okay. Maybe a little less, but I think that idea works all right with that. And let's do a little bit of give onto the elbows as well, because those are feeling pretty rigid. Maybe there, 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 and there. So let's see how that looks. Still feeling like it's moving as a unit, so maybe timing will do that. But I like the idea behind that, so we'll still play with it and see what we can figure out, because I feel like that works for me. But I don't want it to be so rigid either. So let's start getting into it. And let's get the hands moving too. So this one, we want it really reaching almost straight up. And then getting it so that your eye would follow into there. And straight up. And so that your eye would follow, like it's almost pointing into that other hand. And there, so let's see. Okay, now let's just try offsetting these by a couple of frames. So we'll drag, collect them both, and drag them back. And let's see if that'll mix up the action enough for us. Okay, I feel like the hand's working okay, but we need to accentuate the forearm a little more. One of those brain farts. I hate it when you get those brain farts. Where you're like, I know this word, I use this word often. What is that word? Okay. Again, I don't want too much animation in those arms. I still like keeping them like they're reaching up, but we just want a little bit of give there, so. I think this is going to be where we find that we spend a little extra time today on this walk, is figuring out how we're going to get these arms to work. Because there's infinite numbers of possibilities of things of how we could do this or not. So, and let's do fingers. So fingers will do this, and do that, and do that. And then when they're there, we might do the opposite, but we'll start off with going with this idea. To where they're in on this position, reaching out, and then go back out there, and then in here. And by in, I mean inward towards the middle center of the body, and then out, or it's away from the center of the body. But we might do the opposite here. Again, like I said, I think for today's walk, this is where we're going to spend a lot of our time, is just really breaking down how these arms are going to work and how we can keep them alive. And by keep alive, I mean so they're not pixel locked or stuck in a position, that they do look like realistic and not just like a stick in the air. But by doing that, we also don't want that to necessarily be the super focus, because there's a bunch of exaggerated movement there. One thing I think we might need to do is actually go into the arm here and exaggerate that a little bit more. So let's go ahead and do that. Not a ton. We don't really want them too over exaggerated, but I feel like they're a little too much there. Okay, that's starting to feel a little better. I think we could exaggerate the fingers a little bit more. There's a nice little wave to them as they're going up. You see there's like a wave to them. But I think that's working. So Excuse me, that was my phone going off. I should turn that off before. So before we go any further, let's go ahead and just implement some of that stuff that we did on this arm into the other one. I believe we already did the arms. Let's go into the forearm. And we should have it doing that, doing that, doing that, and doing that, and getting back. So let's see. I think we may have done a little too much in that forearm. So let's go ahead and pull it back a little bit. So I did kind of reverse break the elbow on that, which sometimes works totally fine. But when you have like a minimal amount of movement, you don't want to. And by reverse break, I mean like taking it at, let's say, this position and making it something like that, where that would break the elbow. Now, on some really over-exaggerated things, you definitely, breaking joints is a really great tool to use to add extra life and movement to stuff. But in something where we don't want to do something like that, there's some really cool in the Animator's Survival Kit, or Richard Williams' book. There's a great discussion on there about breaking of joints and successive breaking of joints and how you can really add extra character and life and movement to your animation by literally, you know, if an elbow is supposed to move like this, snap it back and then swing it forward, and that'll add a lot of extra life and bounciness and movement to it. And again, that's one of those exaggeration techniques that animators use, where if you frame by frame it, you might see a frame and you're going, what? That doesn't look real, that doesn't look good, what is this? It looks really weird to me. But when you watch it being played back, it just has so much life and so much bounce to it, or so much expression and stuff to it, and that's because of exaggeration and breaking the rules. Okay. I feel like this is not working exactly right, but the feeling behind it is getting there. So let's go ahead and watch it a couple more times so we figure out what works and what doesn't. The hand feels too stiff. The forearm feels like it's moving too much, and the arm itself feels like it might be moving not enough. So let's go in and check that stuff here. So we'll start off with the root of where this movement's coming from, and just hit F to focus that, and try to find something like that. Yeah, we've got a little too much bend on this forearm compared to the other one, and I like how the other one was working better. So let's pull that back a little bit. Go to rotate Z, and we'll just scrunch those values down a little bit. Let's see. And I also think, didn't we redo the timing on these? Yeah, we did. So that could be one of the reasons that we're not seeing as much life here too. So let's take both of those. And I really got to get my second screen working on here so that I can get the graph editor working better. Because I have two screens. I use a Cintiq, and I have a Acer monitor that I've had for a few years. And I do all my graph editor work down below at the other screen. So this is a little bit different workflow than I'm used to, but I think it's definitely, oh, no, I didn't want to go do that. What I wanted to do was redo the timing. So let's grab both of these and hit F to focus on just those frames. We'll select everything, and we'll drag it back a frame. That's middle mouse button that you can do to do that. And then we just want to grab the wrist controller and drag that back another frame. Now let's see how that looks by doing some timing stuff. Oh, okay, that's starting to give us a little bit of the... And we might even be able to downplay the arm and upplay the forearm a little bit more now that we've got a different timing with it. So let's get back into this one, and we'll tune that down. Not a ton. This is just kind of you know, a smidge here, a smidge there until we get it right to where we like it. And we'll play up that one a little bit. But I think, I know when I was first learning animation, there were a lot of tutorials and videos and everything out there of like listing steps to do and then showing something at that step and then go on to the next step, but you didn't really see how it worked or talk about the thinking behind everything, or see there weren't too many tutorials that really showed, you know, someone from the time they opened a scene file to the time that that they were ready to present it. And again, these are a little, I probably would spend more time polishing up stuff and cleaning up everything as well than what I put out here. But I think it's something that wasn't available to me when I was first learning animation, so I hope it's helpful to other people. And again, we're all in the same boat together, so if you have tips for things that I could do better in my animation, definitely throw them down. If you have suggestions, if you have ideas, things you like, things you don't like, definitely leave it in the comments or give me thumbs up, any of that kind of stuff. Because with animation, I really do feel like even though this is an art form that's been around for a while, it's really still, comparatively to, you know, painting and drawing and sculpting and all that stuff, it's still a relatively new artwork form, and we're still discovering new things, we're trying new stuff. I mean, 3D animation has really only been around for the last, what, 20 years, 30 years. So everything, there's new programs that come out, there's new methods for doing it. But I think understanding the principles and the how and why of how animation works is what's really important with this kind of stuff. Okay, I think we have the fingers going the opposite directions than we did. So let's just go ahead and grab index spread and middle spread, and we'll do the opposite of what we have there. And ring spread and little spread. And if you're wondering why I don't just grab them all together, for some reason on this rig, the spreads of the first two fingers versus the second two works differently, so we have to grab them individually. Let's see if that gives us kind of that wavy motion that we were liking. Now let's look at it from this perspective. Let's see how everything's going. We definitely need to, I think the feet are a little too low. I don't want them too high, but we should exaggerate those a little bit more. We don't have hardly any up and down on the head, so we could add that. We could offset and delay a couple of the fingers to give it a little bit of separation, so it's not having the same shape, have some change of shape, and also add some animation into the thumbs. So that's going to be where we're looking at from going on here. So the first thing that I saw was going into the feet, and we're going to polish those up, and also we're going to touch around with the ball roll as well. And my animation workflow is probably a little bit faster than it is on these videos, because I'm trying to be able to explain and think through stuff audibly that I normally just instantaneously look at it and throw it back up. But trying to verbalize that in a way definitely slows me down a little bit. So I apologize about that, but I hope that it's helpful for you and maybe gives you some different ideas or some different ways to look at your animation as well. Okay, so we're just going to increase the size of those steps. And we're going to play with the toe and the heel as well. So let's hit S to save it. And the first thing that I usually do on steps is drag the toe, flip down, and lift it up and flop it down. And then just give us a little bit of drag in that toe and overlap. And we'll drag it back here, lift it up, and plays with the timing, so the foot's not all on the same timing. It plays with the shape of the foot, so it changes shape and keeps it alive. And let's go ahead and do that on the other side here as well. I'm trying to be more articulate in these videos than I think that I have been in the other ones, and it's still a work in progress. I'm not a broadcaster. I've only been doing this for about a week now, so bear with me. try to cut out the ums and the uhs and the pauses, and also be able to really describe what I'm thinking and seeing in a clear and concise fashion, and don't just ramble for rambling's sake. Okay, so let's take a look at that. And like I said, the other thing I wanted to do was look at the heel. Now, since we're animating with most of the weight on the toe, the heel is more noticeable when it is static versus if it was just flat on the ground on each step. The heel wouldn't be as noticeable that it's not moving because it would just be flat on the ground. But since we have it up, the heel should have a little bit of give on it just to keep it alive. So let's see if we can add that in. So let's say from here to there, we're going to have a little more ball roll here. So it'll go up, and then we can go ahead and put the ball roll down there and bring it back up here. And back down again. That might either be too much or too slow. So let's go ahead and pull up the graph editor here and look at our ball roll. Okay. So we want to go from 1 to 12. It'll raise, but I think that might be a little too much, so we'll go ahead and pull that down. 12 to 24, it can pretty much just actually go even back down again. We could zero it out, because one thing, yeah, we'll just kind of do that. That'll work as an easy way just to add some life to it. One thing that a lot of people will teach you, and if, like I said, if this was a really, we're trying to keep it within as close as we can to doing it, these examples within an hour, hour and a half. But one thing that a lot of animators are going to teach you when you're animating is to not use redundant controllers. So like right here, we can animate this foot dragging back by using the rotate X. Also, we could use the ball roll and the toe in conjunction and get that same thing. So beware. In this, like I said, these are pretty just, we're just going with a basic example and just trying to, try new things in our animation and give, and learn a little bit and grow a little bit. This probably isn't something that we would toss onto an animation reel or have be our final pass at an animation. But just be aware on using both the ball roll and the rotate X, or let's say using a translate and a rotate. Those can get tricky sometimes too. So if you have something like if a shoulder, if you lifted it up with the translate, but then you went back into it when you were adjusting it the second time, you went in with a rotate to try and adjust that, you might get some weird things in the graph editor, or you might get some pops that were not necessarily there before. So just something to look out for when you're doing your workflow. But like I said, we just wanted to do a little bit just so that those heels didn't feel too flat and unalive on those steps. And I think we may have again done a little more than necessary. And it's okay to exaggerate, but I don't know that we necessarily want that to be a focus of anything here, or something to distract or pull away from. It's just something you want to feel in there. Okay, so let's see. Let's go ahead and watch it. Again, I think we were settling on a view kind of like this for when we do our play blast. So let's see if those... Again, you'll just feel like the heel isn't completely static and stuck to the ground there, or stuck in the air. Okay, now let's get into the fingers and get some change of shape. And what I mean by change of shape is right now I feel like the hands are kind of, even though there is sway in the fingers, there isn't enough change of shape where if it's swaying, okay, I'll just keep with one hand because I'm trying to do this to camera, where if it's swaying one way, we're getting like a sway that's a universal sway instead of a sway that has some flop in between the fingers, so you can see that change of shape go through. So let's see if we can mix that up. I think we'll do it through timing if we can. So we'll grab the index spread and have that lead the fingers, and the little spread, and let's delay it. I started changing it to do only one frame usually, but let's do 2 frames. Let's see how that looks from this angle. And let's see, what about from the... You know what else might help us? I feel like those fingers are too flat this way, so let's give them a little bit of curve here. Actually, let's pull it back a little bit and give a little bit of mid and a little bit tip. Now I'm doing all of these, but at once just to start off, but then we'll go in and we'll tweak them a little bit so that we get a little more variation throughout that. So let's see how that looks. Another thing we might try is just doing a little more something like that, and I think we might even have to do something. And let's get a better thumb. I don't like that thumb. And we're adding a little bit of cup so that the hand from, let's see if I can do it here. It has a little bit, so you can see a little bit of the index and a little bit of the pinky, so we kind of have a little bit of a cupping to the hand. You can see the pinky there and the index there. That'll just give us a chance to make that hand feel less flat, that's for sure. And that looks a little better already. And I think just because of the camera angle we are using, we might, even though from this angle we can see the fingers you know, sway side to side, we might need to do a little bit of gripping to really feel that over here. So let's go ahead and do index, base, mid, and tip. Grab all these guys, and we'll just add a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there, a little bit there. Just a little bit of straightening and bend to the fingers to see if we can give them a little more life that way. And I feel like that helps a little bit. At least, especially just if we're going to actually use this camera angle, we still want to make sure that that's working. So now we'll do the same thing where we mix up the timing a little bit. So lead with the index, follow with the little. Sorry about that. And then as soon as we're done with this, let's go ahead and save our file again, just to make sure the recording is still going. Okay. Okay, yeah, that works all right. I feel like it might be a little too much, but we can always scale it down. It's okay to over-exaggerate and pull back. And right now I'm just separating it so that the base of the finger will lead and the mid and tip will follow. We might need to play up this arm a little more too from this perspective, because we can see the movement in this one pretty well, but I feel like it doesn't get enough change of shape. Because if we're looking at it from this angle, we can see the change of shape between, you know, this pose it's looking like that, and this pose it's looking more straight. But from this angle, it still feels pretty rigid. Even though you can tell there's a bend in it, it does feel a little bit. So there's a couple ways we could approach that. We could just exaggerate what we have right now, or we could go into the lower arm rotate and add a little bit of rotate in the Y instead of there. And I usually stay away from this, but we're just going to do it just for example's sake here. Let's see if that works. And that'll give us that little bit of change of shape there. The reason I usually stay away from it is because I usually like to do most of my animation in the start of the arm and then only use one rotate in the elbow, because that's a little more natural to how body mechanics works. This arm can rotate, the shoulder and everything can rotate in 360 degrees pretty well, but your elbow is pretty much just a one-trick pony. Even though it can do a little bit of this, it's mostly just forward and back. Okay. But I think that gave it a little more life to that arm. Maybe a little too much. So let's go back in there. I just wanted a little more of that feel. I don't know that I necessarily want to see it. And that's something that you'll have to figure out for yourself, how exaggerated you like to do stuff. If you watch CGI animated movies, a buddy of mine, Michael Amos, he's a really great animator. I believe he's still over at DreamWorks, but he kind of got the class that I started out with at school really into the cloudy with a chance of meatballs style animation. And I don't know, my personal preference is a little less of that, but I really do enjoy that as well. But just in my personal work, I usually tend towards a little bit more either almost video game style animation that's got just a slight amount of exaggeration to it, or really like early cartoon animation is usually kind of how I fluctuate in between stuff. But if you want to look at exaggeration and exaggeration done right, definitely check out DreamWorks' stuff with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs is a great example. They just have some really successive breaking of joints and really almost noodly style arms, which really is a nice way to do it. But when you live in that kind of a world, you have to make sure that you use that enough so that it doesn't feel too out of place. Otherwise, like if you were watching, let's say, what would be a good example? Sorry, I'm still breaking up the change of shape on this hand here. Why can't I think of anything? My mind's going blank here. I want to say Frozen, but that had enough stuff in it. Okay, let's just say Frozen because my brain's stuck there. If you took Frozen and you watched that, and then Elsa started really just having these crazy noodle arms and running flippy floppy and everything, it really would look out of character to her character and her personality. That's a little more realistic or based in realism. And also it would feel off to the scene if the rest of the characters were really a lot more calm and not as broken and wacky in that way. But it's really fun to mess with exaggeration, and there are tons of great examples. That's just the one that comes to mind right now. A friend of mine, Laura Craig, you can look her up as well. I don't know what studio she's working at right now. She was doing some work with Demos Raisalis, who is a great teacher. Really tough, but I learned a ton from him. He's an animator over at DreamWorks as well. But Laura Craig was really into that kind of style of animation as well, and the really over-exaggerating and really just stretchy kind of animation, and it's really cool. A lot of, now that I think about it, can see that same kind of, not exactly in the same way, but those same ideas in Adventure Time. Has a lot of that, where you'll see like Finn or Jake's arms just woo, really crazy. But it's really fun. I mean, it is a fun style of animation to really do that exaggeration. But like Frank and Ollie were saying when we were reading that earlier, you know, you have to make sure that it is in the right time and place, because if you saw that in, you know, a Studio Ghibli movie, you know, in the middle of, I don't know, I love Ghibli. They're awesome movies, but it probably wouldn't look as natural in like Howl's Moving Castle if you saw like Finn in there with turning, you know, into a bus and then having Jake or whatever. Anyways, you get what I'm saying. You got to make sure that it's the appropriate setting for it. It's in the appropriate environment, that the other characters, it's not going to feel way too out of place. And again, there's other animation like Robot Chicken that probably would throw something in there just for the heck of it, of totally off kilter. So it's just got to be whatever kind of story you want to tell and how you want to tell it. Just make sure that exaggeration fits in there in the correct way, that you're using the principle as best as you can to sell the idea that you want. But there's tons of great examples out of that. One cool kind of timing exaggeration that you can look at is in Wreck-It Ralph. They do a really cool thing, and I believe it's been a while since I've seen it, so bear with me, and I'm sorry if I get this wrong, but when Ralph goes up and to like get some cake and everything, they're having a dance party there, and the timing of everything is it's almost like a blocking, which would be a different type of spline editing. You can set it to blocking, where it's like almost on like twos, like it'll hold for 2 frames and then go down for 2 frames, but it seems like they almost have it on 4s or something. But they have like where they're doing this dance party where they're like and it's a real almost jerky, but it's such a great animation technique, because it really sells. If you look at a lot of old video games, you know, they were really basic at the time, and it brings you back to that feeling, and it was such a great choice that they chose there. Okay. Oh, we've got some nice exaggeration in the chest. Hands have a little bit extra wave to them. We've got a really exaggerated pose to begin with. I think we could maybe add a little more up and down overall in the hips. And maybe a little side to side lean in the head. Go back in there and we'll check that out too. Maybe a little less up and down, a little more side to side. I think that might be what we're looking for. Now that feels staticky, so or flat. That doesn't feel like it has enough life in it. So let's push back that up and down a little bit more, and let's add a little bit of lean here, just a little bit. And then we might delay the timing on that as well, just so that if the body sways, the head would sway behind it. But I think we have that built into our posing as well. And let's do a little bit on the head, just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. You want to look at a guy who's exaggerated, and I'm thinking about this, and I'll tell you my stream of consciousness of how I got here, but you want to look at a guy who's really over-exaggerated. You want to get a good example of exaggeration. Richard Simmons. That guy has a lot of energy and a lot of exaggeration in his posing and the way that he moves and the amount of energy that he has. It's so very exaggerated, and people love that. You know, that's what they love about it. But the reason I was thinking about that is just a little bit, a little catch from an oldies song. which I can't think of the name of at the time. And he did this tape that my mom used to have when I was a little kid, Sweating to the Oldies. Richard Simmons, man, that guy has a lot of energy. A lot of energy. Definitely someone if you want to try and get an example of who to look at. Another one that I was thinking about earlier today that I wanted to try and mention, and I'm glad I remembered it, is there's a video, just a funny video, and you know, I'm a total internet nerd. Internet nerd? What does that mean when you like, you know, check Reddit a lot and do Twitter a lot? I don't know, a holic, I guess, whatever you say. But Jimmy Fallon and Jack Black did a cover of More Than Words on the Tonight Show or the Late Show or whatever it is with Jimmy Fallon. And if you look at the expressions that Jack Black's face has during that that song, they're great. He does some really over exaggerated and not just, you know, wacky, but just really selling each of those emotions and overselling them and everything. But it's a couple good examples of looking at exaggeration. Okay, well, I think that's working just fine. Just fine. An exaggerated pose. We got a little bit over exaggeration in there. We got some subtle in the arms. I think we could actually play up the fingers a little bit more, at least that little finger. It's not enough change of shape in those last three, so let's go back into that one more time. But I think this idea, we've taken it pretty far with where we can go with it already. And one of you know what, I think I'm just going to actually try something different and do the opposite with it. Nah, that's too much. I'm going to just delay it. One more frame. Yeah. Let's see. Let's just go through right there. We'll just do totally different timing on that pinky because I want it to do some stuff that it is not doing, and that's okay. You can break your formulas. You don't have to have too many formulas for animation. They're just a good starting spot, I think, to have a base for what you can go to build off of. Let's see how that works. It's fine, except for that it intersects too much. Right here. Here? Right here. Right here. Okay, so let's see. You can probably, we don't need that much, just a little bit of change of shape and a little bit of... Is that too much? If you think that's too much, leave me a note in the comments below. Definitely. I think we got some good examples of exaggeration. We had some good talks. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Another couple of things, just save your work. Go to show, let's turn off the NURB curves. Let's grab these couple of manipulators here, and we'll make a new layer and hide those, and let's watch it one more time without that. I think that'll work just fine for the idea that we're going with today. Remember to keep exaggeration in all your animation. Let's just right click in the time slider and you can do a play blast of it if you want to do that. Yeah, it's real. We're keeping with the KISS idea as well today, keeping it simple. That way we'd have a nice video to go with. I got a couple of ideas here. I hope you guys thought of some new things or had some new ideas or different things to check out. Thanks for hanging out with me and doing this animation thing as we learn every day together, and I hope you guys are growing and challenging yourself and getting inspired and doing different things with all your work. Remember, give me thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Go ahead and leave me comments down below. I'll have my Facebook and Twitter and Twitch feeds. I do some drawing in the morning. You can come watch me do that, hang out with me, whatever you guys like. I hope you guys are having an awesome, wonderful day, and thanks for hanging out. And don't forget to exaggerate. Let me figure out where the off button is, but exaggerate, and